Welcome back. I'm Ken. We're visiting with Mike. Mike, it is amazing. It is remarkable how many different kinds of organizations in very different places use common threads. They have similar leadership ideas when a
Yes,
leader is doing a good job of
yes,
introducing change and getting out of a rut.
yes.
Tell us more.
Well, today we'll look at a guy along those lines. His name is Yunus. He's from Bangladesh. He came to the United States to get his PhD. He was teaching before that, came to the United States, got the degree, went back home. And when he was teaching, he had to cross a neighborhood that was very poor between his house and the teaching assignment school. So he was a little bit, I guess, butted and said, "Well, somebody must be do something." So one of the things that he noticed is that it wasn't that the people were lazy, but that they were in a poor area, and how do you bring people out of that situation? And what he noticed is that a lot of ladies were doing what I would call crafts. They would make baskets and stuff like that. And essentially, what they did is they went to a supplier who would provide the raw materials on the condition that they would give back the finished product for which he would pay them a pittance. So they were working, but the guy who was making the money was the guy who provided the raw materials. So he said, "Well, how do you break that cycle?" So he decided that he would approach local banks and ask them if they would lend money to those kinds of businesses, and essentially got laughed out of their offices because they were saying, first, they're all women, and women don't count. They're in that society. It's they're not they're not seen as equals. Two is they have uh, no assets. So you have nothing that can guarantee the paying back of the loans. And I guess the third one is that in a lot of cases over there, when the year is over that you have to pay back the loan, guess what? You have a large amount of defaults. So the point was, is it's a bad business proposition. We won't touch her with 10-foot pole. So he said, well, okay, I'll take some of my money. I think he says that initially he invested $40 in one of those things. And what he would do, he would give loans of $25. So to us, it's not very much. And even then, when that happened, it still was not very much. Uh, but what struck me when I read the book is the process that he put in place to essentially change the culture. Because even the women who who eventually took loans, who borrowed, were very reluctant to do that. Because first, how is my husband going to react? Uh, $25 to them was a fortune. So I got all nervous and said, well, so you had to change the existing mindset in the culture. And the reason I stress that aspect is that uh, there is a tendency when we see a success is to duplicate a particular technique. It's particularly true with, say, for instance, the Toyota system. And people will grab a technique, apply it, or try to apply it, and at the end being very disappointed because it's not the technique. Well, the technique is important, but it's the context, it's the culture, it's the mindset that you have to change. And how do you do that? So that's the challenge, and that's the challenge even to date. In my case, in one company, I was successful with one group, but the leadership was reluctant to, I don't know what to call it, commit themselves really to making it happen. So the success of that group essentially just didn't transfer to other places because everybody else saw what the management was doing and they saying, if they're not moving, we're not moving. So culture is important. The context is important.
So if you take a technique and apply it without dealing with culture and mindset, it will
Yeah.
fail miserably most of the time.
Yes. Yeah. The mindset and the thing that's very interesting also is that a lot of people think that local culture will trump what you're trying to do,
Yes.
and that's not the case. Toyota
Uh-huh.
has shown that in transferring their approach of management to a number of countries. Uh,
In
one,
Tennessee,
one,
Marysville, Ohio. And sorry, go ahead.
no, no. One time I was at Toyota headquarters, and there was a manager that I knew. I saw that guy going down the stairs. I said, "Oh, hello, how are you?" Oh, he says, "I'd love to talk to you today, but I'm on my way to India. I can't spend the time today." So I said, "Oh, what's happening in India?" So he said, "Well, we they were building up production there." So I said, "Oh, that's interesting. You have a trade-off. Do you use cheap labor or do you use the technology? Which one are you going to go with?" They said, "No, no, no, you don't understand. We do it the Toyota way." See, the whole thing was we don't transfer just the technology, we transfer the mindset, the attitude, the values, the practices then become part of the culture. And that's what's important. So looking at Yunus, we see that he did a number of things that were different. One of them was they were the person who wanted to have a loan would have formed a team of five other people who also wanted loans. So right there in the process, you've got a selection kind of thing that if you're going to want money, you want people also that will be successful because they may drag you down if they don't perform. Um, so you would have a group of five, and what he would do is he would give the loan for the two of the five, not the leader, but the or two others, and then for 6 weeks they would pay back. Every week they had to pay back a certain amount of the loan so that you didn't have the lump sum payment at the end of the year. You had it as you went along. Uh, so if those people perform for 6 weeks, then two more would be added to the list. So 6, 12, it would be what, 3 months, 4 months before the leader actually got money to be able to perform. And the idea was is that even though each of the five people didn't have to be in the same business, they had to be could be in different places. Some of them were uh, renting time on a cell phone. So it's interesting in that context because nobody could afford a cell phone. But if somebody had one locally that you could use, then they could access greater markets and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of crazy things that are in the book. Very interesting to read. But the point was is that the group was self-accountable and had to perform. And if one failed, then the group had to help that person straighten up. Because if they didn't, then that was the end of the loans for them. So you had a real accountability. And the thing of paying every week, 7 days, made it that you had a short time span. So you had to perform. It was made it very visible. So every week they would meet with somebody from the bank to give their money and to be current.
It
Then
sounds
in
to
addition,
me, it sounds like not only is there buy-in, but
yes,
it takes it to a different level because you're invested in everybody in the group, not just your own success.
yes,
Reminds me a lot of a group assignment in school.
yes, yes,
Others can drag you down, but anyway,
yeah.
fascinating. Thank you for explaining that.
So that was so there's when you look at all those steps, you have groups are self-motivated.
Yes.
They're self-motivated, but not only that, the people who you team up with um, are known quantities as compared to you investing in a business and you have no idea what what the leadership is going to do.
Right.
So they were self-motivated, and then you had that. There you have also the concept that we talked about before, subsidiarity, which means that people were empowered at the lowest level to perform. And there were some serious consequences for non-performance. And the results were very transparent. So the openness of the process. So when you look at the the whole technique, you see that the women had to pass at they had to take 2 weeks course and pass a test and then start the process.
Hmm.
So right from the beginning, you would essentially train them to how to do business, I guess, the
Hmm.
kind of things that you have to do with what the expectations were going to be. So you have a total change of mindset from one of being used by the supplier of raw materials and a husband that says, good for nothing, to one, oh, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it happen. And you have the people who are willing to work or are already working, so they have a track record, I guess you could say. And that total change of mindset is radical when you consider the culture of the country. So bottom line is that the process was very successful, so much so that the bank that he initiated dealt in millions of dollars. And it was so successful that the government, for political reasons, decided to sue him because he was making money, lending money to people who couldn't afford it.
Wow.
And that's even after he had won the Nobel Prize for doing what he had done. And
Yeah.
his system has been duplicated in a number of countries where there is poor. They're
Yeah.
called micro enterprises.
Wow.
So the the culture addresses the issue of mindset or the heart. You have to be able to provide a different rationale, a different commitment, a different attitude. And this just doesn't happen. You have, in this case, he trained them for 2 weeks and then he put in the system also that was counter to local culture. So that's why I like this book. And the important thing is to realize that if you want change, it's not an add-on of the technique, because when you look at an add-on, you don't change the mindset. And then I was thinking about, well, what does the Bible have to say? Well, it's interesting because Paul in Ephesians 4:22 says, lay aside the old self. Okay, so you have to give up the concept of I'm useless, I'm no good, I'm stuck here, and whatever. And then it talks about in verse 23, be renewed in the spirit of your mind. In other words, you've got to change your thinking, you've got to change your heart. And then he talks about in verse 24, put on the new self. So by the training and all of that, they've adopted other way of behaving. They change the relationship with suppliers, they change the relationship with the customers. And also in Romans, it says, do not be conformed to this world. So the world of those women, that's where they were stuck in. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Again, the same thing. You've got to change your mindset. And then it says that by testing, you may discern what's good and acceptable and perfect. So you've got to think about it and challenge the system. And there has to be a better way. And that's what he was able to do.
And the culture change and the mindset change comes from inside.
From the heart, yes. That's why at the beginning of those sessions, we talked about the heart or the mindset. What is it that you hold to be true, to believe, that you act on? Because it colors all your behavior, it colors all of your thinking. Okay. And that's what I find this book very gratifying to read, is that he was able to do that with people with no education, the bottom of the bottom kind of thing.
Yeah.
And getting tremendous results to the point where the bank was very, very, very successful with people that technically had nothing.
Would never have been given the opportunity by the regular banks.
Exactly.
So anything to conclude? We've kind of used up our time, but boy, this is good. I'm so glad we could draw the connections between Eunice and Bratton at New York City, NYPD, the real police department, not the TV show, and Nehemiah.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
Yes. Well, and that's a common thread across all of them. And what I was trying to stress today is that don't focus just on the technique. Like, for instance, Bratton and Gosen set up teams to make assessment and recommendations. Therefore, I'm going to do that too. That won't work unless you have a change of mindset. And it means changing the culture.
Important. Excellent. We will conclude at this point, but we'll be back. And thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. I hope it helps somebody. If not, they can always give us a buzz and say, hey, what would you do in this situation? Anyway, not that we have solutions. People have the solutions. The question is, what's your mindset? And that's a self-assessment thing, and saying, okay, what is it that I believe? And what is it that could be? And then what is it that I've got to change? And that's the key.
The email address that's associated with this channel is one that people are welcome to use to make questions. Thank you.
Very good.